Many of us spend our whole life in search of purpose, desperately seeking meaningful ways to make a difference in the world with the short amount of time we are given. The Deploying High podcast has been designed to help you analyze what gives you purpose.
How you doing? I'm Gene Saunders. I'm the founder and CEO of Project Lifesaver International, and I'm the host of Deploying High. Today, we're going to be talking to an old friend of mine. A gentleman that I worked with for actually a couple of years and introduced me to a whole lot of different things in the world of special operations. I'm eternally grateful to him for that, because a lot of this I've been able to carry on into other phases of my life, and it's helped me greatly. We kind of parted ways because he got transferred and eventually retired. But we tried to kind of keep in contact, and I was finally able to persuade him to come on this podcast because I think his story is interesting, and I think you'll enjoy hearing it. So without going any further with it, I'd like to introduce my special guest, Mr. Chuck O'Connor, retired U.S. Navy SEAL. Chuck, how are you doing?
Sir, I'm doing awesome.
Yeah, well, you're looking good.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, thank you for being here. So we've kind of laid into who you are, but not really. Let's talk about who Chuck O'Connor is. Where did Chuck O'Connor come from, and how did he get to the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Navy SEALs?
Well, I grew up on the East Coast in Baltimore. So I think where we actually live within the city, that's where my street survival, the techniques and the concepts started then, because it was a pretty violent part of town that I grew up in for everybody, not just for any particular one person. It's just the way it was. So as you get older, okay, what do you need to do when you grow up? What do you do? I tried going to college for a year. That didn't seem like the right fit at the moment. And so looking into the military, I was thinking Marine Corps and actually Navy, because when I was in high school, I read a book about UDT. You know, what UDT was and what they did during World War II, how they were commissioned and why. And I'll never forget reading that book thinking, I could never do that. There's no way I could ever do that stuff. Well, a couple of years later, there I was doing it. Anyway, it seemed like at that time, college didn't seem right. It was kind of confusing for me, trying to figure out what I needed to do. And it just seemed like the military was an option. And I was never opposed to going in the military, because when I was that year in school, I was in ROTC because I wanted to do some kind of service into the military. Growing up with the Vietnam War was on the news, and I always felt like, and when I was old enough, there was no question in my mind I was going to be serving in the military anyway. And if the war was still happening, I would be probably serving in Vietnam. All my uncles, they were all World War II veterans. My grandfather was a World War I veteran. So I was never opposed to serving in the military. Well, now let's figure out what I need to do. So talk to Marines, talk to the Navy. I really liked the recruiters from the Navy, how they explain things. It was pretty interesting, the comparison. And it wasn't that the Marine recruiters didn't know their stuff. I mean, they were really impressive guys too, but there was something about the Navy guys and what was potential. Also career. What can you do career-wise if the military doesn't work out? And the Navy electronics program is pretty well renowned for employment, a career post-Navy life, if that's the way you want to go. So that made sense. So I signed up for the Navy. This is around 77. The Vietnam War was over for now about a year and a half officially. And so I didn't go to Vietnam. Anyway, once in boot camp, that's when I was introduced to, or everybody's introduced to the specialty programs that the Navy offers, like hard hat diving, EOD, Naval Special Warfare. And the recruiters for those communities are in the boot camps. That's where it starts. So that's your first presentation of those programs. And if you think you're interested, there's a time that you can do the screening test and see if that's what you want to do. So I was like, well, I'm thinking about this UDT stuff. And then now SEAL team, I never heard of SEAL team. that sounds like that's what I want to do. I mean, it felt like something spoke to me. And, like that little voice they talk about, or how your heart felt. I was like, that is something I think I need to be doing. So I came in with that A school for electronics, dropped it, and ended up going to Buds straight out of boot camp. So I went because the electronic stuff is a critical rate. So they're going to train you into that, that career. They want you to work in that career. They're not going to let you go through all that schooling and then go do something else. So that's logical. So I had to drop my A school. So the caveat was, if I don't make it through Buds, I'm going to the fleet, non-rated. So that means bosun mate, chip and paint, mess grinding,
Hayes, gray, and underway,
basic maintenance stuff. So that was an incentive to make it through the program. So my orders were cut from boot camp. I went to Buds. That's when Buds was just on the West Coast at the time. Used to be during Vietnam, was on both coasts. And so I was assigned to Class 98, made it through, and I was allowed to go to SEAL Team 2 out of boot camp. So that's how it all started there. SEAL Team 2 was a lot of fun. It was challenging. That was at the end of the Vietnam War. A lot of the downsides in the military, a lot of budget restrictions. The challenge to be combat ready with budget restrictions. I think all the people responsible for training and running training and managing all the different things we had to do, I think were really pretty clever with the budget restrictions. We used to always joke about them and some of the frustrating times of that. Like, we have helicopter trucks instead of real helicopters, but everybody wants to do, like the helicopter guys want to work too, but budget restrictions are what they are. But you have to maintain your skills. And I think the cleverness of the guys that were doing the in-house training really made it really workable. It's SEAL Team 2 at the time. The majority of the guys there were all non-vets, multiple tours, so a lot of knowledge, of the reality of combat, reality of our job. Okay, granted, it's specific to really the Vietnam experience, but naval special warfare is all around the world, and there was other global conflicts going on. Vietnam was the one that was in the news all the time, but guys had a lot of experience in a lot of different areas around the world and interacting with the different problems, the different cultures. And so that was a lot of experience to teach us, the new guys, between Buds and those first few years at SEAL Team 2. And I did an extended deployment, ended up being longer than I think it was originally scheduled because of other global events. I came home and it was like everybody was gone. I'm still like a couple year kind of new guy, and I'm one of the senior guys now at SEAL Team 2, literally one of the senior guys, because this command called SEAL Team 6 stood up, and in standing up, the priority of that mission, a lot of guys from all the different commands were obviously who were selected to go there. And it seemed like everybody I knew, or a lot of the people I knew, were now reassigned. And so that was kind of interesting. But, it's still, the duty is that the stuff we were doing at SEAL Team 2 was really pretty interesting, particularly over in Europe, because, the Cold War and stuff like that. And our allied nations are just awesome special ops groups. And I'm working with them, really good experiences and their global experiences, learning from them what's unique. Cold War, one of the primary AOs was Europe. If we have to go to combat with the Eastern Bloc throughout Europe, that was a priority. And so that was a primary focus for SEAL Team 2 at the time. Yeah, and 83 is when they recommissioned all the UDTs, the underwater demolition teams, as SEAL teams. And
pause for just a second. Cut it for just a second. And I think 1983.
In 1983, the underwater demolition teams, the mission of UDT supporting the Marine Corps Amphibious Task Force wasn't really needed. The Marines had everything they need organic for the Marine Corps and for getting the grunts across the breach. So Force Recon kind of took over that mission because they're already with the Marine Task Force anyway, the Amphibious Task Force. So they took over that mission of the beach reconnaissance and getting, the landing craft, doing the reconnaissance, setting up the lanes, the obstacle clearing as required. All that was made sense. So to recommission the UDTs as SEAL teams made sense. So that was happening. So now there's more SEAL teams in the how each command was assigned to another part of the world just made things, I think, more efficient. Because prior to that, you had SEAL Team 1 and SEAL Team 2. And we kind of, between the two SEAL teams, we had to look at the globe and be prepared to do combat in all these different environments, from like jungle, Arctic, mountain, a city, desert. We all had a shared responsibility in that. And it's one thing learning your tactics and learning your tactics in a different AO, but learning the environment. How do you operate an environment? How do you survive an environment? Those are critical skills. And they're full-time skills. So it kind of, the way they divided it up, the command could be a little bit more area focused that way. And that made a lot of sense because, you can be a jack of all trades, but then you're a jack of jack shit, right? That's how the saying goes. Be a little bit more unique and specialized and focused on those environments. And what's good about that too is you're working with your allied counterparts, and you can really nurture your relationships with these guys you can go to war with potentially. Because those are like our relationship. I mean, that was years in the making, and it's forever. But you make these relationships with your counterparts that last your entire life, not just your career, but your entire life. And I think that's critical, particularly in special ops, when you're in a combat environment. You're there with your friends. You're not there because the politics gets you there, but you're there to, you're with your friends and you have a mission. And you're going to do your mission because that's what you swore, you're sworn duty. But you're there with your friends and you're looking out for your friends. And that's really the key to that. And in special operations, I think we're really lucky because we work with motivated people who want to be there, who want to be in the job because you're all volunteers. Because I think the draftee image from Vietnam, a lot of people didn't want to go, but it was a requirement, okay? That's something that doesn't happen in special ops. And again, everybody wants to be there, you volunteer. The way they always said it, you volunteer in, you volunteer out.
Absolutely.
That's the way it is. And you can complain about how things are, and everyone does. But at the end of the day, like Commander Marcinko always said at the time, you don't have to like it, you have to do it. If you don't like it, well, you can volunteer out.
Absolutely.
So that was so in '83 was also when I was allowed to screen, and also was when I went to SEAL Team 6. So SEAL Team 6 was already up and running for a couple of years. The urgency of again, special ops is interesting how, like you were just mentioning, the 60th anniversary of SEAL Team 2 and SEAL Team 1 was this year. And you got to go to the anniversary. But I look at 20-year cycles. Okay, UDT became a necessity, particularly during the island hopping campaign in the Pacific during World War II. About 20 years later, because of Vietnam, and lessons of what the guys did in Korea, of coming from the water, working in that littoral environment, collecting intelligence, and some of the other combat missions that SEALs do, really kind of started in Korea. A lot of people don't talk about what the guys are doing then. But the foundation of the evolvement of now the need of Vietnam, the guerrilla warfare, counter-guerrilla warfare, kind of especially for the expansion of the special operations, that happened in '62. So now you look at SEAL Team 6 and now the need for more specialized capability because of global threats. Well, that was about a 20-year cycle when that stood up. That whole program of what SEAL Team 6 was designed to do, and other commands, has a national strategy capability. And so that was kind of already started. A lot of really dangerous bugs were worked out when I arrived there. Unfortunately, like all the different commands that made up the program, people were getting hurt, permanently hurt. People were getting killed. And so nobody was immune from that because it was literally doing things that had never been done before. So we didn't know the tactics. We didn't know what equipment we needed. We didn't know how to coordinate all our assets per se. We had to figure that out. And it literally was written in blood, unfortunately. So when I arrived there, a bunch of things were already figured out and improving, but it was still in a lot of things that still needed to be perfected and figured out. So the evolution of all the different types of equipment, the insertion platforms, the asset coordination, it was still a lot to do. And it was still just as dangerous as the initial days. In fact, I don't think the danger ever goes away. It's literally everything you do every day is going to kill you. And you can say that probably with every special op assignment. So what are you going to do to not be dead? And the guys with you to not die. So it's that was the challenge. And we were pretty motivated to do that. Yeah, it was a really, really unique feeling to be selected to go there. It was very close hold because of the nature of the work. No one really, there was a lot of speculation about what was going on, but no real knowledge because no one talked. And because you just didn't talk about it. That was the culture at the time.
Yeah, just not to interrupt you, but, because 6 was right there where I was in the Tidewater area, and being, with SWAT at the time, you asked me one time, says, well, you guys probably knew we were around. And I said, yeah, we knew you were around. And I think you asked me, you said, well, what kind of name did you put on us? I said, yeah, we called you Team Jedi. So, yeah, we knew that you were the Jedi guys.
Yeah, there was a bunch of, when I was still at 2, the joke was the secret squirrels.
Yeah.
The SEAL team, shh. There was all kind, it was cool. Then to be allowed to screen, to look at everybody, the people in charge of the place at the time, and I'll be interviewed by them. And okay, let's give dumbass a try, and to be able to make it. That was a pretty intense process. Once you go through the screening, first you have to already be on the SEAL team or UDT. You already had to have performed for a number of years, and pretty much in those days, because Naval Special Warfare was a much smaller population across the board, both coasts, than nowadays, and so everybody knew everybody. So the guys that were already in the command had a say on who was being selected, who wanted to come, who was being selected, and why. Because you're going to war together. So and then to have the acceptance of the guys, okay, yeah, all right, let's give them a shot. Hey, that's cool. There are guys I know, but it really was a command that wasn't for everybody. What they wanted done and how they wanted it done, the intensity of that. Not everybody was allowed to go for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of people didn't want to go for a lot of different reasons. And it was a pretty intense place to be. We worked long hours. In the early days, anywhere between 12 to 16 hours a day wasn't uncommon. So the support staff was really small. So a lot of the support and duties had to be done by the operators. So that's what made the long days. And that slowly started to change. And that was really nice because even with the support people being screened for what they were there to do, were really just squared away men and women. They really knew their stuff in that regard. We also used our support people as our role players, which was always a good test of what were we figuring out tactics wise, to go against real people, because everything was live at SEAL Team 6. There was no blanks. There was no simulated everything. It was all real. We had our own helicopters. We were well supported, funding. The safety restrictions weren't applied like in the traditional military and special ops because we're doing something that's never been done before. We don't know what they are yet. So when people got hurt, we want to figure out, was it equipment? Was it a procedure issue? We want to fix that. We want to fix it now, but there was no stand down. You keep going. And nobody was in trouble because, again, we're doing things that never been done before. We need to learn from it and we can't stop. And we'll learn as we go. And that was a pretty intense place to be. But the no restrictions on funding, no restrictions on how we wanted to do anything we wanted to do. I did another interview with Explosive Entry, for example. Explosive entry is done in city environments. Well, a city environment is not a range. You have to learn that stuff in real time. So we're out on old structures, learning in real time. And some of the other types of target complexes that we were expected to respond to, we're working in real time.
Now, explosive entry, let me interrupt you, Chuck. Explosive entry, or the other word for it is breaching.
Correct.
Well, that was one of your specialties, wasn't it?
Correct. That was when I went to Buds. You're going to do a lot of different things. You're going to have a job in a platoon. The diving. People have to be in charge of the equipment. They have to be in charge of designing the training evolution and running it. Parachuting, diving. Everyone does it, but certain people have to design the training. So that parachuting, diving, explosives, the small unit tactics, and management of the weapons. So when I got to Buds and everyone talked about the explosives, our last phase, the third phase, we were doing explosives, and there's academic tests. Everyone was worried about passing and doing well on, and one was dive physics, because if you don't pass a test, you're done. You're out of the course. And the explosive test, because there's a lot of technical information in the manuals, and we have to be able to know that stuff and how to apply it. And you need to know the information in the manuals. And something in my heart said, I want to be that explosive guy. So I studied those books. I listened really hard to all the lessons and applying it. I get 100 on an exam. And because I knew the instructors at Buds, wherever we're going to go, because the instructors are all from the different commands that we're all going to be assigned to. So I went to SEAL Team 2. The instructors that were from SEAL Team 2 were telling SEAL Team 2 about me. And likewise for everybody that graduated my class, how did we do? And what are their impressions? So when I arrived at SEAL Team 2, they had a good idea already of who I was from the critiques of my instructors that just came from SEAL Team 2. So that was kind of cool. So knowing that I wanted to do that when I was assigned to a platoon, saying, hey, this is what I want to do, and that was not an issue. So I'll start from there. The explosive stuff that we did at SEAL Team 2, that was the combat demolition, underwater demolitions. It was pretty intense. There was a lot to learn, a lot to maintain. I think a lot of the way things evolved, and particularly because of the war, a lot of the basics in the demolitions is not as preserved as it could be. I think a lot of the things became priorities for survival, which is a shame. But you have to survive. 20-year war in a certain location. The evolution of that, you have to survive, because the time doesn't matter if you're not surviving.
True.
What skills you have to set aside to survive that ever-going mess, wherever country the guys are deploying to, is critical. When I heard from a lot of people when things started winding down, is a lot of the core skills, like with maritime, they have to kind of like reinvent what that was. And that's where the old guys come in handy. So that was, so when I went to the 6, explosive entry was, we still had all those SEAL mission things we still were doing, but that was the add-on there. So it was just natural to start, taking, being part of the lead of my assault team in the explosive entry research that we were doing. And I tell you what, that was I think back on this a lot. That was decades ago. And I've been at that particular game for quite a long time, and learning the intricacies of urban environment, any kind of warfare in an urban environment, in particular using explosives, was a lot of lessons learned, because, our traditional explosive education culture isn't designed for that. It's not designed to be having an intimate relationship with a detonation. Everything's designed from remote academic study and standoff, not being close. And I think that's one area where that whole skill set can improve. And I write about that quite liberally, and I run my mouth about that to to the point of really making a lot of people angry.
Well, you've authored several books on explosive entry and breaching, haven't you?
I have. And the latest one's a hardback textbook, and it supports my class, but also wrote a version for any operator or commander who I haven't had a chance to run through my program. If they want to have more, it's about subject matter expertise. It's really written for your safety and the other things that happen post detonation that you don't learn on the range, in particular all the legal proceedings, like a criminal trial and all the potential liabilities and complaints, because they can be a lot of different types of ways. Well, how do you prepare for all that stuff? And what do you do? And you need to have all these, all the mechanisms in place, all your paperwork in place, all your policies, the buy-in of your command, all the way up to the executive level, and the support of your legal people, all before you do that operation. It all has to be in place. So what are these things?
Our SWAT unit was very fortunate to have you and, of course, several other guys, but we learned a lot on not just explosive entry, but just breaching, period. And I was very fortunate because I went through your course, and I learned a whole lot. I still get your books, and I do read through them. I'm not going to say I'm proficient enough right now to blow a door, but at one time I was. So,
absolutely.
But
anyway. Well, I guess we may as well, so that was all kind of the things I was doing at 6 at the time. Then we talked about this the other day. So because the chief was the agency, they have a small municipal airport. So we were doing a lot of our skydiving training there locally rather than have to get on the road when we had to be in town. So someone driving through the city speeding, got pulled over for speeding, but you can tell them what the orders were for your patrol division guys, in case one of our guys were caught speeding or whatever. So you can pick it up there. We had the occasion to talk to an individual that was in our city, and and then it just became kind of okay, we've had this encounter, we talked to him, that's it, okay. And I'll never forget one day, the chief called me down to his office. I was still the SWAT commander, and there was these 3 rough-looking guys sitting in his office. And he introduced me to you and a couple of other guys and said, I think these gentlemen would like to talk to you. Why don't you take them upstairs to your office? So I did. And I'll never forget the first thing that one of you said, I believe it was you, before we can talk, you got to sign this paper. And that was a non-disclosure. And they said, now, if you veer from that, we'll have to cut your head off and put it in a safe, and you'll never be seen or heard from again. And that was the beginning of our relationship. And it was a very valuable relationship for my team, because they evolved from a small town, halfway organized team to what I felt, and even after training with several other the very large cities on the West Coast, into a very proficient, efficient unit, because of the relationship that we enjoyed with you and several others. I think that kept us in an area where we knew that whatever came up, we could handle it. And we did. And that was mutually beneficial. Now, I want to go back to a statement you said. You said it was like a small town, like compared to a major metropolitan city. It may be, when you look at population, that might be how it's described. But the big city problems, the high threat problems, were just as prevalent in Chesapeake as they were in the big cities like Philly, Baltimore, and other places on the West Coast. They were really no different. Yep. And us being allowed to interact with you because in the United States we have the laws, the pars comitatus, police are for domestic, military is for overseas. Everybody respects that. The higher authority can make exceptions to that when there's a unique circumstance from the president and other levels of chain of command. If there's a relationship that makes sense. So we were granted permission to not just work with you guys with the SWAT team, but we were allowed to participate in anything the police department was comfortable with us as far as the police force. And that was mutually beneficial because the violent crime, the evolution of violent crime, has a lot of similarities that affected our mission and in our tactical responses. So to be working in real time with the SWAT team and the other SWAT teams we were allowed to interact with was really valuable for us to confirm, our tactics. Or what are we doing? How are we preparing ourselves? How relevant are we when this is going to be the next time he has to do something for real? So we think we're pretty good. But it's nice having that confirmation from real time, and that was really, I think, a big plus for the command. That relationship we had with Chesapeake Police Department was monumental, and all the police departments we were allowed to work with. So I appreciate that. That was some of the, like I said the last time we talked, that was some of the really the best times of my career working with Chesapeake Police.
Well, it was mutually beneficial, and we're definitely a mutual appreciation kind of guys because we know what became of what we did.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything that could ever replace that. I know my experiences were tremendous, but from you and some of the other guys, but, probably you were the main focal point and you kind of drove it all into a direction and it stayed there even after you left. So your influence kind of stayed with it and allowed us to keep that relationship going. I know I felt very privileged because I got a really close relationship with you guys. The only thing that I ever said that I wouldn't do is, going on the over the beach operations out and then shipboarding, I wouldn't swim back to the beach. I remember saying that.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you because I didn't want to do any of that crap either.
So, yeah, I said that one night. I was in.
It was a long time doing a whole lot of crap that I had no desire to ever want to do again. And every day there would be something like, why am I doing this stupid stuff? This is going to be the stupidest thing anybody can be doing with their life. When I get done, I'm going to look for something else to do. But, you get done doing some hardcore stuff, you survive. Everybody's euphoric. You start drinking beer. Now you're baddest ass things ever jogged in rig box. And next thing you know, you forget about looking for something else to do. You're right back at it the next day, and you're going, "Why am I doing this stupid stuff?" But yeah, I want to come back to something. Working with you guys, I think the success of I'm glad we brought something to the plate as far as like our expertise and what we were learning at the time. But I think the big success of the SWAT team and the entire task force that you were commanding, the other elements that made up that task force, and was your leadership. And this is what I told Nora when we interviewed for the Deploying High book. My perceptions during that time, it was that your leadership and the confidence you instilled in everybody was so monumental to all the different mission successes that task force was capable of achieving. It's great to have been part of that, but it was really you and your leadership and how you thought out of the box, thought unconventionally. All the criminals that are willing to do the hardcore stuff they're collecting intelligence on the police. So how do you stay off their radar screen on capability? You're really clever. And we're talking about a couple different examples, but to just think out of the box, to take a very dangerous situation of bringing these kind of people into custody or hostage rescue and not hurting the suspects as well as no one else getting hurt. That was very impressive. And that's a direct result of your leadership and the confidence that everybody had in you and your mission planning and the preparations before the operation. After your briefs, and it was time to go, there was a question in anyone's mind what they were supposed to do, what was expected of them. And everyone knew the consequence if they did not do well, and what that could mean for the police department and for the community. And they took that very seriously. And again, that's a reflection on your leadership. And I don't know, just working with you was just so much fun. And the guys, oh my gosh, that was just some of the best times really during my career to have that opportunity all those years. Oh, it was great because everybody was just wanted to be there. So dedicated. The chief was awesome, supporting our involvement. Because without the chief, and all the police agencies we work with, all the way up to the chief, you had to go through our chain of command up to higher headquarters and sometimes even higher level. And but everybody's being supportive of the what we can learn for all of us, for all our missions. Was I know it still happens, and I'm glad it does. The world keeps evolving, and the military gets used more like a police force than during that time, and police forces are dealing with military style threats. So it's just the relationships are just a smart thing to keep doing. That's my opinion.
Well, no, and that's a good opinion. I agree with you 100%. I echo your thoughts and your statements. I think SWAT was one of the most enjoyable pieces of my police career, and working with you guys was certainly the highlight of it because of the experiences that I was allowed to have and some of the things you guys got me into. Those were great too, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute of it. Chuck, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I want your promise that I can bring you back because I think this story has got a long way to go, and I want.
I think there's a lot of things we can chat about. Story time's one thing, but I know the a lot of law enforcement guys right now, a lot of challenges, a lot of lessons learned. I think from both our careers that for all the first responders serving nowadays, and other professions that are viewing the podcast. And I'd love to come back anytime.
Well, you can count on that for sure.
Right. Well, I appreciate
that,
Chief.
There's a lot more we'd like to get into. You're working with law enforcement now in explosive entry and in breaching, because I think that's an important element that a lot of law enforcement officers need to be aware of and know about, especially in their special operations unit. So, Chuck, thank you.
Absolutely.
It's been great seeing you,
Chief.
talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We have been talking to Chuck O'Connor, a former member of SEAL Team 6 and SEAL Team 2, who now is an expert in explosive breaching and breaching. It has been a great conversation. Please subscribe to Deploying High on either Spotify, Anchor, or the YouTube channel. And I'm Gene Saunders, the founder and CEO of Project Lifesaver International and your host of Deploying High. Hope to see you again soon. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Deploying High podcast with Chief Gene Saunders, brought to you by Project Lifesaver International. Deploying High would like to thank all of our supporters across the country and around the world. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe to our channel, make a donation, and don't forget to tell a friend about us. All proceeds from the Deploying High podcast go to support Project Lifesaver International, online at projectlifesaver.org, the original 501c3 nonprofit organization.